Welcome to the Weissbier Brewery of George Schneider & Sons. You are currently in the world's oldest wheat beer brewery. The brewery was founded around 400 years ago in 1607 by Duke Maximilian. In 1928, the Munich brewing family George Schneider acquired the brewery. The family has been running the brewery for the past 6 generations and always under the same name. I usually introduce myself as George Schneider, and at the same time I add the number 6 in order to avoid confusion, even at the post office. My father, George V, is still living, thank goodness. He is 82 years old and in very good health. My son, George, is 14 years old, and just to be clear whom we mean, we stick to the numbers and call him George VII. Brewing beer is a trade. Just like baking bread or making sausages, it is a trade, and in the smaller and mid-sized breweries, it is still seen as such. As with everyone can create art with it, and through it, one tries constantly to perfect it, to bring new ideas and new twists to it, starting with the raw materials and transforming it into a masterpiece. Nature is a great wonder to me. The hops that are just beginning to sprout in May. An early harvest is possible at this time. The offcuts of the unneeded hop plants are a wonderful delicatessen that is prepared a lot like asparagus. And 3 months later, at the beginning of August, the hops are fully grown and stand proud in all their glory. They need massive amounts of nourishment from the earth. They need all the light and warmth the sun can provide, and they need lots of care and attention. As the saying goes, the hop garden wants to see the farmer every day. Actually, quite similar to wine, the hops are a very, very difficult plant to cultivate. But it's simply fantastic when you see how quickly they reach for the skies. You cannot imagine the amount of energy that is being drawn from the earth and what power nature mobilizes to achieve this. Year after year, I stand awestruck and, of course, a little sad when the wheat is fully grown and will soon be harvested. When the hops are reaped, then the summer is officially over, and we continue working into the fall. What we do here, we do hands-on. We practice our trade, and we actually use our hands during the brewing process in the Sudhaus, the brewing cellar. The process of skimming the yeast by hand is a very exact and meticulous job. The yeast is carefully carried through the various brewing procedures, and we choose the raw materials very carefully. We are also confident enough in our craft to brew beers that are beyond the norm. You have the basic recipe, the idea of how a beer tastes or should taste, and then you have to create the nuances with the constantly changing raw materials. Today, we have malting barley and wheat that we didn't have 150 years ago. They weren't even available. It is also well documented that the climate is very different to 150 years ago. Crops grow differently now. Even the hops grow differently, and we also have different kinds of hops to those available in the past. And that's why we have to constantly control the new raw materials that come every year to readjust the process so that the basic recipe, the basic idea being maintained, be kept throughout the years. I had the honor of knowing my grandfather very well. He was born in 1900 and died in 1991, and we talked much about the olden days. We used to drink beer together, even when I was 16, and he told me about his experience of the taste. And that is how I created the recipe for Wiesenweisse, which is known as Mein Grünes, my green. On one occasion, I asked him, "How does that taste?" And he looked at me and answered, "It's different every year." And of course, that made me curious. At the time, I was studying at the Weisse Braueri College, and I really wanted to reconstruct this recipe. I questioned him on the pressing and also on how the hops are treated, and he just answered pragmatically and said, "You know, we were required to produce a Märzen-type beer that's usually brewed for the Oktoberfest. The basis was therefore clearly defined. We mixed 60% wheat and 40% barley malt together. That was obvious. And we added the hops that we had. The beer was to be brewed at the end of August and the beginning of September for Oktoberfest in October. The hop cellars were emptied, using up the old stock because in August, the new hops would be harvested and they needed to be stored. It was just a question of what was left in the stores. If it had been a good summer and a lot of beer had been brewed, then there were less hops available. Or, in the case of a bad summer, when less beer had been brewed, then we would have many hops left over. We would just pour all the hops into the beer because back then, you didn't want to leave things to waste away. But when hops get a bit older, they start to taste like lemons. And as my grandfather said to me, "Hey, a little bit of lemon flavoring was always present." The lemon flavoring wasn't added to the mix, it came from the hops themselves. At Weihensteffen, I tried a little experiment. Yet no matter how hard I tried to reproduce this lemon flavoring in my studies, I never got it right because there weren't any older hops available at Weihensteffen, and I didn't want to wait a year until the hops were old enough. Then, coincidentally, although I don't believe in coincidences, I was visiting a master brewer in the USA, and we were drinking an Indian Pale Ale in a bar. Suddenly, I tasted the same lemon flavoring. That was at the Brooklyn Brewery. The next day, we looked up the number of the master brewer, called him, and asked if we could meet. We went there and asked Gareth Oliver of the Brooklyn Brewery, "What hops do you use for your IPA?" And he explained that he used Cascade hops, a kind of hops I wasn't familiar with. We ordered some of these hops immediately after our trip to the USA. After some very adventurous dealings on the international hop markets, the hops made their way here and were brewed into our Wiesenweisse beer. And true to form, the slight lemon flavoring was there. And so that is how we got our famous recipe, which was simply a reconstructed idea from my grandfather. Even now, we sell Wiesenweisse in the USA. In Germany, we are experiencing a market and a market environment that is not really characterized by its growth, or at least not by growth in volume. We Germans are getting older, fewer, and we are changing consumer habits, including those concerning beer consummation. So here's my message to the market environment. I don't want to increase production volume, but I do want to increase quality with interesting specialty beers, with exceptional beers that offer a whole new taste dimension, but not chemically altered and without artificial ingredients. I want to inspire people. Beer can be enjoyed in another context. Instead of serving wine with a good meal, why not try a great beer to accompany your dinner? This is the beer I am offering. This is the beer I am developing. Because of our manufacturing processes and our structure here in Bavaria, we won't be a market leader in price. This we know. This is about quality and continuing to inspire the people who stand by us, not just in Bavaria, not just in Germany, but worldwide. And then there are also new markets. These markets are rich with people who have a strong interest in beer. They show people that are interested in international specialty beers, and what they all want is truly authentic beer. And that's why a concept in local resourcing is necessary. The people don't want a Bavarian beer brewed with Russian malt. They want a Bavarian beer brewed with Bavarian raw materials.
Die Mitarbeiter sind das eigentliche Kapital.
The employees are the real capital of our company. Without our employees, the company can't move forward and is therefore a poor fellow. That's why it is so important for the company to develop dialogue with its employees. And the input and experience from the employees are at least as important, if not more so, than what is learned from the outside. As a businessman and as a manager, as one who holds the whole thing together, I must be a bridge so that ideas generated internally and externally are combined, and all can reap the rewards. It was actually the purpose of the label to boost and define what was inside the bottle and to whet the visual appetite. I am not a painter. Painting is my hobby. For me, it is a very relaxing leisure activity. I pondered working with the ideas of color and taste, though the idea to put it on the labels came much later. Until that time, my experience with designer labels had always been negative, not because the designers weren't good or there weren't any good pictures delivered, but because the content had nothing to do with what was on the outside. After a few negative experiences with labels, I suggested that we just try to be as authentic as possible and to show on the label a painted impression of the taste and to distance ourselves from other products. Usually, one doesn't go about making a beer label like that, but it is now a label that sticks out from the crowd. I think it is very authentic, and one can see by looking at the label exactly what is inside. My idea was to return to what happened when tasting a beer. I had many tasters trying many beers, including my beers, and I asked many questions. What does this beer remind you of? What happens to you when you drink it? How does it affect you? How do you feel? And what could go well with this beer? I did the same in an entire series of tests, and I always had my 7 beers, and the tasters always knew which beer they were drinking. What amazed me was their very similar associations in their comments. They used different words to describe their findings. One said it reminded him of hay, or another said freshly mowed grass. But their general conclusions were remarkably similar. There seemed to be something approaching an objective taste. The challenge for me was then to find out which color would fit best to their taste impression. I went to Munich's Art Academy. There was a very informative color chart. According to the taste impression, I painted different color combinations. For example, which colors are seen on a blooming mountain meadow? These pictures, depicting how the beer tasted, slowly but surely came into being. And one by one, it turned into the overall picture that we have today. To best comprehend the imagery and to get the true feeling of the beer, you should look at the picture while drinking the beer. There's nothing better. To begin with, I have the basic colors from the taste impression, and starting roughly from this, I work in more and more detail. I have the description of the taste from friends, from family, and from employees, and I try for the first time to present the colors. Then, I begin with the main color. What is the prevailing mood? Is it light? dignified, supporting, or maybe elusive. This is how I choose the color. The color transforms as I begin to vary within the individual shades, trying to bring it to life and make it change. That was a brief impression by George VI behind the scenes at his family brewery. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the exciting tour and savor the Weissbier tasting.